My name is Donald Waigumblizi. I am the country manager of Ericsson in Uganda. We've got a group of panelists from Ericsson as well as from the United Nations, with whom we are going to be walking you through this sustainability event. Just to set the stage right, we have built this sustainability event around the Ericsson Sustainability Report that we released recently that covers 2021. As you know, we do report on sustainability on top of the other components of the operations of the business, finance, and so on an annual basis to the shareholders, to partners, and also across different indices and different organizations. So we want to share this with you, let you know how we look at sustainability, think with you as we go along on what the different areas of collaboration potentially could be locally, globally, and also within the African region. And let's see how that fits within everyone's thought process today. So without wasting so much time, very quickly, in 2-3 minutes, maybe even less, I will ask my colleagues from Ericsson and the other panelists to introduce themselves, the name, your organization, and what you do, and then I will jump into the first slide. Can I start with you, please, Ayub?
Thanks, Donald, and good morning, everyone. I'm Ayub Osman. I'm based in Kenya, and I head up sustainability and corporate responsibility for Ericsson in Middle East and Africa.
Thanks, Ayub. Zakia?
Good morning, everybody, and thank you, Donald. My name is Zakia Rahman. I am the Sustainability and Corporate Responsibility Program Manager in Africa and a member of Ayub's team for Sustainability and Corporate Responsibility in Middle East and Africa.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jean-François Lebillon, and I'm based in Abidjan in Côte d'Ivoire. I lead government and industry relations across a good share of Africa, so working closely with Ayub and Zakia when it comes to discussing sustainability with our government partners.
Thank you, Jean-François.
My name is Chris Lukolia. I'm the digital country lead for UNCDF in Uganda. And looking forward to this discussion. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for joining, Chris. And finally, Rose.
Good morning, and thank you very much for having me on this panel this morning. My name is Rose Mwebaza. I'm the director of the UN Climate Technology Center and Network. We are based in Copenhagen in Denmark, but I'm actually in Bonn for the last couple of weeks, where the scientific bodies meetings of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. So I'm very pleased to be here.
Thank you, Rose, and the rest of the panelists. So we want to pack everything in 2 hours. Most of a part of it will be the presentations from the panelists, and then we want to leave another part for discussions, questions, and answers that might have been provoked by the discussions in the minds of our guests. We'll have some fireside chats where we will discuss a little bit more on particular issues. The Ericsson sustainability approach is built around 3 pillars, which is environmental sustainability, responsible business, and digital inclusion. So as we go along, we will explain some more detail about the specific pillars against which the Ericsson sustainability is built. We have been in the business of networking and infrastructure, partnering a lot with communication service providers for the last 100 years. And over the years, we have been able to contribute to the provision of connectivity across different generations, from 1G back in the 1970s. And now we are talking about 5G being rolled out. You might have seen a couple of reports from Gartner about our position and our participation and contribution globally when it comes to 5G, and even the discussion about 6G, where we are actively participating in the setting of standards. What that has done for us is give us an opportunity as a connectivity leader to refine our purpose and our vision. And how we look at it is that we want to be a telecommunications provider that allows limitless connectivity. And after we have allowed that limitless connectivity, we hope that it will help to improve lives, to redefine business, but all of these will be geared towards pioneering a sustainable future. So our vision really is that we will be able to provide technologies and innovations which will open new possibilities for our customers. But not only stop there, also help to resolve and solve some of the greatest problems and challenges of our times. And this we hope to be able to, if we achieve it, improve lives of people across the globe. We are involved with the Exponential Roadmap. We are involved with partners from the United Nations like the UNHCR and UNICEF, as we also are involved with different suppliers. A lot of you people on the call here would be providers and partners of Ericsson in one way or another, or even customers, probably current or potential. So for us to have this engagement and for you to be able to join it is a great opportunity for us to start a discussion, a cross-cutting discussion across the entire ecosystem of our operations and potentially yours, of how we can all be a sustainable component of business, and what each of us can be able to contribute to drive this positive impact. Of course, not forgetting academia and business. So shall we now take it away, Ayub, with the environmental sustainability?
Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to share more on what Ericsson does in sustainability and corporate responsibility. And as I mentioned earlier on, my name is Ayub Osman. I head up sustainability and corporate responsibility for Ericsson in Middle East and Africa. If I may just start with a recent quote, if we can move to the next slide, from our CEO. And please allow me to read this verbatim, where he states, "We have integrated sustainability and corporate responsibility into our business strategy. Ultimately, conducting business with integrity is the only way we can drive real and positive change." At Ericsson, we recognize that the technology that we develop and deploy can be key to meeting some of the global challenges that are outlined in the Sustainable Development Goals. And we're committed to doing business with integrity to provide value to our customers and society. Every year, Ericsson assesses the standard ESG topics, environmental, social, and corporate governance topics that are significant to us as a company, but also to society. And we present them in the Sustainability and Corporate Responsibility Report, which Donald has alluded to earlier. We'll move to the next slide, please. Ericsson was founded on the premise that access to communication is a basic human need and should be available to all. Last year in 2021, we introduced a new vision, as Donald has shown earlier, where we've mentioned that we'd like to improve lives, redefine businesses, and pioneer a sustainable future that's built on the power of mobile connectivity to deliver positive impact. Now, the word sustainable future that sits in our new vision has always been there in our vision, as I mentioned, in our strategy. And in addition to integrating sustainability and corporate responsibility into our business strategy, we also focus on embedding our sustainability strategy and programs across the value chain, as you can see on the slide here, to create that positive impact, mitigate risks to Ericsson and our stakeholders. When we look at the value chain and the society impact, we focus on those that have a direct impact and those that have an indirect control. For example, we look internally at our own activities and our own operations. We look at the products and services that we sell to our customers, to the market, by addressing this through our portfolio. And then we also look at the impact from our supply chain and also finally how we impact society. I'll go in a little bit more detail in a later slide in terms of how we actually work these different components. But if you see on the left-hand side of the slide here, we focus on three strategic areas as a company when it comes to sustainability and corporate responsibility. The first one is corporate responsibility, where we drive a proactive agenda that extends beyond just legal compliance. And our aim is really to develop responsible business practices that strengthen Ericsson's position as a trusted partner to our relevant stakeholders. The second pillar, which I will cover a little bit more on in the next section, is what we call environmental sustainability. And here we focus on the circular approach to most common people. It's about recycling, reusing, reducing waste, e-waste, for example. And here we aim to minimize the negative impact of our own operations to improve environmental and energy performance of our products and reduce societal environmental impacts. And our climate targets that we set around this pillar or strategic area are in line with the UN climate agenda to reach the 1.5 degrees centigrade trajectory. Then finally, the third pillar or third strategic area is what we call digital inclusion. And here we're committed to supporting and reaching underserved markets through our products and services, improving communication, access to communication. We advocate for accessibility, affordability of communication infrastructure by providing services that drive sustainable economic growth and innovative solutions. When it comes to addressing the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs as we refer to them in short, we cover all 17 goals. However, we as a company, we focus a little bit more on the combination of Sustainable Development Goal SDG 9 and 17. 9 is around industry, innovation, and infrastructure, and 17 is partnership for the goals. And we believe that focusing on these two enables us as a company to create positive impact at scale and address a number of global challenges through these two goals. If you can move to the next slide, please. Thank you. Ericsson has been a pioneer in sustainability in the private sector since 1993, so very, very long before it became a fashionable slogan or a boardroom topic worldwide. And for us, it's really about sustainability is really about driving real change and positive change. Our sustainability objective in Africa and the Middle East is to be seen as a trusted partner who promotes sustainable and responsible business in Middle East and Africa, what we call our market area, whilst driving positive change in society. We enable this through our Africa in Motion campaign. Most of you may have already seen a lot of that out in the market. And our technology-driven solutions help Africa leapfrog many of the socioeconomic and environmental challenges it faces. And as I mentioned before, can help us realize all the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Just to give you some examples of the things that we are doing in Africa, we do a lot of work also in the Middle East. When it comes to sustainability, I wouldn't read everything that's in the slide here, but if I could just highlight some of the key ones. Last year, for example, we processed over 1,000 tons of e-waste from Africa and Middle East through a program that we call Product Take Back. And it's our extended producer responsibility where we offer a free service to our customers to take back electronic waste that Ericsson sells out to them when they get to the end of life or the product has reached its to the end of service. And we have done so for our customers in Uganda in the past. Our work also contributes to the fact that, as you know, Africa has quite a few of unbanked population. And we try to help serve the unbanked or underserved population by supporting our customers, and allowing then this population to transact, save, pay bills, exchange money, insure and invest, and become more of an active economic participant with more control over their lives through mobile financial services. So as Ericsson, we provide platforms, for example, to our customers who offer a range of financial services to customers, allowing them to have a greater financial inclusion in the continent. And then a third item that I would like to highlight out of the list of things that we've put here is we also focus heavily on digital education. And it's well before COVID-19 came in and people had to go online to do some studies. Accessibility to online platforms or even internet access was not even there. To some schools, it's completely shut down. But we have inclusion and through what we call a Connect to Learn program, which my colleague Zakia will speak a little bit more about in a later examples of the things that we do to set Africa in motion. If you could move to the next slide, please. So if you recall, we had the 3 pillars, corporate responsibility. And now I will go in a little bit more of a deep dive on what we do in this particular pillar, which is environmental sustainability. As we all know, climate change is one of the most urgent global challenges. Ericsson continues to focus on energy use and environmental impact of technology, as well as operations across the value chain. Our work on environmental sustainability focuses on improving energy performance of our portfolio, reducing emissions from Ericsson's supply chain and own activities, implementing a circular economy approach to the product design. So any material or any products that we take out to market, we give a very keen interest on the product design and the materials that we use in the production of the products. And then demonstrating how Ericsson business products can enable society and other industries to reduce emissions and become more circular. Our circular economy approach encapsulates everything, as I mentioned, from design to manufacturing to the use phase through reuse, like I mentioned, product take back, where we take our extended producer responsibility, and the end of life processes. We continue to make significant investments to improve the energy performance of our portfolio. And we really believe that improved energy performance of our portfolio enables a lower total cost of ownership. So not only does it benefit the environment, but it also benefits our customers because it reduces their operational costs. At the same time, their network-related carbon footprint. To meet customer expectations and help industry reach net zero, we've also introduced an innovative approach to reduce network energy use through what we call breaking the energy curve approach. To support the ICT sector's transition to a lower carbon economy, the ITU, the International Telecommunications Union, released the net zero standard to guide companies in the sector on setting net zero targets and strategies. And as a company, as Ericsson, we have contributed to the development of this standard. Not many people know that, actually, and which meets the requirements of science-based target initiatives and the UN race to net zero definitions. So in addition to contributing to this standard, we have also committed to following the ITU's net zero standard. And last year again, we set a long-term ambition to be net zero by 2040 across our value chain. If you can move on to the next slide, please, Gloria. So as we continue to focus on energy use and environmental impact of our technology, we strive to minimize the negative environmental impact across our own activities and our value chain and make an impact across our society. So as I mentioned earlier in the slide where you saw the 3 balls with the value chain, our own operations, society, our portfolio, etc. When we look at our own activities, you can see on the top right-hand side of this slide, here we try to reduce our carbon footprint and have net zero emissions by 2030 in our own operations. Remember, across the value chain, we have set a long-term ambition to be net zero by 2040, but on our own operations, we are planning to reduce emissions to reach net zero by 2030, so 10 years before that. And in addition to that, this new target covers the company's what we call Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions, as well as Scope 3 categories related to business travel and employee commuting. So earlier this year, for example, we set a target in the company to reduce business travel by 50% so that we can reach these targets that we've set ourselves as a company. Our science-based targets to reduce emissions by 35% by 2022 covers emissions from fleet vehicles, facilities, business travel, and outbound product transportation. By the end of 2021, which is last year, we achieved 60% reduction compared to the baseline that we had set, which is well ahead of the trajectory. When I look at the second box at the bottom left-hand side of the picture here, we also look at our portfolio, and as I mentioned, breaking the energy curve. So as part of our net zero journey, we're committed to halving the emissions within our own portfolio by 2030. Energy use and network operations really remains a priority for us and for our customers. And we believe that improving energy performance of our portfolio, like I said, enables a lower total cost of ownership and network-related carbon footprint. To meet customer expectations and help the industry reach that net zero, we've introduced this approach, which is breaking the energy curve, and I can cover a little bit more on that later on in the chat or in the Q&A if needed. Our solutions also enable telecom operators to manage expected growth in data traffic, to meet the needs of current networks and also 5G, which is still in the future for some of us in Africa. And we have set ourselves again another target here around our 5G product portfolio, which is to be 10 times more energy efficient per transfer data than 4G by 2022. And I'm really, really happy to say that by the end of 2021, we were well on that target at about 9.3 times. So our target was 10 times to be more efficient by the end of this year, and we were already at 9.3 times last year. So it's quite an achievement, I have to say, when we're addressing the portfolio. Then when we look at the supply chain, we have also set ourselves some targets of halving emissions by 2030 as part of our net zero journey within our supply chain. And we have a target of aligning suppliers that are responsible for 90% of our supply chain emissions to set their own aligned targets, 1.5 degree reduction targets. And to further promote climate action in global supply chains, we are one of the initiatives and founders of the 1.5 degree supply chain leaders initiative. And as at the end of 2021, again, more than 120 of our own strategic suppliers have actually set their own aligned targets to support in reducing, reaching the 1.5 degree target. Finally, on industries and society, when we look at the big picture, as I mentioned, ICT plays a very, very big role in environmental sustainability, and digitalization are key enablers to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And according to our own research that we have done as Ericsson, ITC solutions have the potential to enable a 15% reduction of emissions across industries, name it from manufacturing to transportation by 2030, whilst being only responsible for 1.4% of the global carbon footprint. So we can really only fulfill this potential in working together with our partners, and that's why we focus on SDG 17, which is partnership for reaching those goals. Ericsson remains committed to supporting the Paris Agreement and also working through our partnerships, as I say, to scale global climate action, to limit global warming to the 1.5 degrees centigrade as described by the IPCC, which is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And we've set our targets to really be science-based targets, so not just wish-washy targets as sometimes some people might do. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of a highlight on what we do now on a big picture, and then getting to what we do more from an environmental sustainability. And I'll hand back to Donald, who will then take us through the next section. Thank you.
So to get into this fast side, Ayub and Rose, I will ask a few questions so I get your insights and your thoughts. How can we contribute to this fight against climate change in Africa? And I agree, we all agree that it is a global discussion, a global topic. I'm using Africa just because we operate here, but feel free to extrapolate your proposals and suggestions across what you're seeing in the globe. We've just seen the IPCC release a report, and also the World Economic Forum. So the challenges of climate change coming out of business operations and activities are no longer deniable. So, Rose, what would the UN's key concerns be around climate change, and how do we use technology to try and mitigate or solve some of these?
Thank you very much, Donald. First to say that coming from the UN, to completely agree with you that we really believe that the private sector, such as yourself, under SDG 17, is the best possible approach for us to deal, one, with the global environment sustainability challenge, but more specifically with climate change. As I told you, every year in June, the world converges in Bonn to analyze the science and what it's telling us, and therefore what we can do as a global community to come up with actions or solutions now, as we would like to call them, to address the global challenge. And the problem now is that we have multiple crises upon us. Where I sit in my organization, we are focusing on 3 planetary crises, as we call them. It's climate, it's the crisis on nature or environmental degradation generally, but pollution, air pollution, pollution of the seas, and pollution resulting plastics and other things. But now it is also compounded by the global economic challenges resulting from war, a post-COVID-19 world. And so we look to the partnerships between the public sector, as we call ourselves, and the international civil service and the private sector. And therefore, what we envision in this partnership are several things, but I'll mention one. I think listening to the work you were talking to, for example, on digital transformations and environmental sustainability. So we look to partnerships that can help us develop inclusive data architecture, because information is power. How do we work with you to develop this digital architecture for data that helps us put information in the hands of the people at all levels to make the right decisions relating to climate action, but also to environmental usage? Or how can we create these digital solutions and we are able to deploy them really at scale? You talked about your, the number of people on your mobile money network. There isn't a single UN entity, I think, that has access to 80 million people at once on a day-to-day usage. So you bring a lot of social capital that would allow us to reach those people at the same time to enable the transformation that we want. But I think it's you also touched on something that we are cognizant of, even as we think of how we can work with companies such as yourself. So it was really nice to hear some of the innovative approaches you already have in place to deal with. But the first is we are very much aware of the digital divide, especially in the part of the world where I come from and where your team is largely represented. Ericsson is a global company. You just said it's in over 100 countries, but the digital divide in Africa. So even though we know the possibilities that digital technologies, for example, can bring, how can we bring that really across the board to everybody, given the large digital divide that we have? And so how do we develop digital tools that would really be simple and accessible to all, and really work in an innovative way that enables broader uptake? On our hand, in order to encourage that partnership, then we focus on working with the governments, our member states, as we call them in the United Nations, on focusing on building the right policy and regulatory frameworks that create the incentives that would enable companies such as yourselves to take the innovative approaches that you're taking in addressing the global challenges we have. I know you did mention that your focus is on industry as it is, SDG 7 and 17 for partnerships. But in fact, in listening to you, you're doing a profound amount of work on SDG 13, which is on climate action and all the things you're doing aligning to the global goal on limiting global emissions at 1.5 degrees or net zero, as the industry partners now call that. And so we think that is a very important part. And if I may just conclude by focusing on something else, innovation. Part of the reason for us partnership is very important with companies such as yourselves is that we know you more than anybody else invest in innovation and R&D. And we are looking at innovation in several aspects. We are looking at innovation in business models that reduce greenhouse gas emissions and create circularity, such as you are talking about. We are looking at innovations in financing for how we can bring greater integration of sustainability and climate action in these business models. But we're also looking at innovation in technologies, and that's why we think digitization is one of those areas where there's great opportunity for innovation that enhances sustainability and climate action. But we are also looking at innovation in policy, because technological innovation or business models don't happen in a vacuum. They must be anchored in a very substantive policy and regulatory environment at national level that enables businesses to thrive with certainty, with security. So we look at innovation in those very different aspects. And so those are some of the things that I wanted to share with you in my initial conversation.
Thank you very much, Rose. I'll extend this question then to you, Ayub, to provide some examples from what you see in Ericsson, what the biggest areas of impact could be in the Ericsson operation, in the Ericsson way of thinking, when it comes to environment and climate change. What do you say the biggest areas of impact are?
Yeah, thank you, Donald. Okay, so I mean, just to come back to your question about the impact on business and environment, and what has the biggest impact on our business. I mean, what I see personally is, I mean, communication is really, really important in this in content and today's world. We've seen that it's almost like when you have basic needs, you need to add communication to it as part of it. Communication service providers are estimated to spend about $25 billion a year just to power their networks and site infrastructure, which consumes a very, very high proportion of that budget. And the biggest impact for our business is how we then, as a vendor or provider of products and services to these communication service providers, how we can then support our customers and society in managing their energy use and supporting their journey towards net zero. I mean, we've seen a lot of commitments from some of our customers, both in Africa and in the Middle East, making a lot of commitments around net zero, which feels like a bit of a buzz right now, but their long-term ambitions to really truly make a difference, when it comes to climate action and climate change, as Rose has alluded to. We support our service providers, like I mentioned, during the presentation, with what we call this breaking the energy curve concept, and or bending the curve, whatever you want to call it. But we've seen that as more data is consumed, there's more requirement and stress onto networks for energy requirements. So you find that as data traffic grows, you will find that also the requirements for energy grows equally. And what we have come up with is this concept in terms of how can we support then our communication service providers to change that trajectory rather than going upwards, to bring it down or bend that curve. And we do this through creating innovative approaches that enable operator networks to use as little energy as possible, and managing that expected growth in data traffic, because that will continue. Communication service providers, mobile network operators, all make their business out of this growth in data traffic. So we cannot expect them to stop that data growth. And the question is, to meet the needs of both their current and their future networks. As we move to 5G, there'll probably even be more stresses to network. Energy saving software features, for example, they can activate that immediately. We also have these intelligent energy saving features, and we've done some computations ourselves and seen that this can up to 14% energy savings while still maintaining that same user experience. We also deploy things like artificial intelligence to operate site infrastructure more efficiently and also manage that energy proactively. But I think it's just very important to explain back to everyone what we are trying to do. As you asked, what is the impact that that we make in our business in terms of environmental and climate change. And I mean, we sell products, so the best way, and services, the best way to support on reducing that impact is actually through the products and services that we then provide to our communication service providers. And last year, for example, we launched certain types of radios that are designed specifically for Africa customers in mind. And I mean, the landscape in Africa is very different from other markets. So we went ahead and looked at products that actually deliver requirements for the African market, but at the same time, we also, like I mentioned earlier on, look at product design and manufacturing and use, and we also kept in mind the energy requirements of our continent. So these products deliver up to, for example, 50% lower energy consumptions than their predecessor products. And earlier this year, we released 7 new products again, that all have, a minimum of 25% less power compared to current products. And we've deployed such solutions already with our customers in Madagascar, Morocco, Ethiopia, to just name a few. And by deploying some of these services, we're seeing things that have historically never happened before. We're finally breaking that energy curve. And really to reinforce this commitment on environmental sustainability, we pledged our support to MTN earlier this year on their call to Road to Zero climate action program. So we are already partnering with some of our customers with their pledges. And as Rose has mentioned, partnerships is really, really key to try and achieve this. And finally, then through our own operations, which is a very small part of the value emissions, we're equally focused on optimizing how we operate. And that's one of the reasons why last year we revised our own target to be net zero for our own operations by 2030, across the value chain by 2040, and which is not very far away. I mean, it sounds like a really long way away, but it's 8 years to 2030 now. So hopefully we can get there, at least for our own operations.
Thank you.
Back to you, Donald.
Final comments, Rose, on technology and environmental sustainability.
Thank you, Ayub, and thank you, Donald. I think really the important thing for us is solutions. And as I said, there's a real recognition within the public sector representing the government, the UN entities that represent the member states, that the solutions are going to come from the private sector. And just listening to you, we know that. And I will tell you, for example, that you must know the science-based targets that you set as private sector companies. The equivalent in the private sector would be the nationally determined contributions that member states make as their targets on the path to net zero. In fact, we know that the NDC targets, as we call them, that the member states have set are way below what is required for us to achieve the 1.5-degree target under the Paris Agreement. And so the possibility of that partnership, between the public and private sector, you working with the governments to provide those technologies and to use some of your innovations to achieve the targets we've set for ourselves in the Paris Agreement is really very critical. But to say for me in closing that, as you would know, this year on COP27, as we call it, but also COP28, these are important conference of parties on climate change. One, because they are both in developing countries. The one this year, we are calling it the Africa COP. It's going to be in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt. And one of the conversations I've been having actually this week with the Egyptian COP presidency, as we call it, the importance of highlighting some of the important actions that are happening on the continent on climate and environmental sustainability generally, but most importantly, the partnerships we have with private sector. And so in making a pitch, one of the things we've planned for this Africa COP, as we are calling it, are thematic days. And there are 2 thematic days I would really like to follow up on a conversation with you. I would like to highlight some of the work that you're doing, and I hope you'll partner with us in doing that. we have an innovation day and a solutions day, because what we would really like to do is to share the solutions. As I said, while we did recognize the value of, for example, digital technologies, we were also cognizant of its energy consumption patterns, but also the digital divide. But we know that within your value chain and your sustainability targets that you're indeed working towards circularity, but also energy efficiency, and therefore limiting those energy consumption patterns. This is important because within the Paris Agreement, one of the things that member states are doing is the voluntary reporting under Article 6. And one of the solutions we are looking at is using blockchain technologies on their reporting. So how can they borrow from your practices on the solutions you've devised on energy efficiency in your systems using, for example, blockchain technologies, if we are going to work with member states on that? So again, just to highlight that this is hopefully a partnership that we will begin to nurture, and that as we do what we will call the Innovation Hub and Solutions Days, that these are solutions you will share, because I think we need for the member states, especially in Africa, to know that these solutions exist largely in the private sector where a lot of innovation is happening, and that they need to embrace those partnerships in a way that really makes sense. I don't even know that the Ugandan government, for example, knows the solutions you can possibly provide as Ericsson to the country. And I was just meeting the country delegation here. So I think there's real potential in the partnerships around SDG 9, but also really SDG 13 ultimately, because you're providing climate solutions as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ross.
Thank you, Rose, and I really welcome that potential partnership that we can have, and of course, you know, Donald, as our country manager in Uganda, will take up that challenge to make sure that, you know, he is pushing for, you know, the right innovative solutions, you know, in the market that are supporting, you know, with the SDGs. But if I could just maybe just also then give my quick sentiment on sort of positive aspects or opportunities that really around climate action for Africa. And as you mentioned, you know, the Conference of Parties, this big environmental conference that will happen in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt later this year, is quite important. And I've already started seeing, for example, COP28 will happen in Abu Dhabi next year. And we have already seen, for example, our Middle Eastern customers already gearing up with wanting to do a lot of joint efforts leading to COP28. But what I have, and this is my personal opinion, of course, I've seen a bit of a lack of that from our customers, for example, in Africa, and probably because they have other problems to face, other challenges. But we know that, and as I mentioned, that energy is such a scarce resource in our continent, in Africa, and you know, a lot of our operators are grappling with you know, paying for huge energy bills. The energy bill for running just a network, about 20 to 40% of a network's operational expenditure actually comes from energy costs just to run the networks. And if they can address that in a more sustainable way, not only do they benefit from supporting, you know, some of the sustainable development goals around climate action, but at the same time, and it helps actually reduce their operational costs. And connectivity is really important. It's not going to stop. Studies have shown, for example, that just a 10% increase in mobile broadband adoption results in about a 0.8% increase in GDP. So we cannot stop mobile broadband from continuing and moving up to 5G and everything else. So it's even really more important that, I mean, and there are opportunities here. I mean, when I look at, for example, financial inclusion, and I was trying to relate this, for example, to what I mentioned earlier on, where, you know, our continent, because of having a lot of unbanked and underserved populations, mobile money really took off so well in Africa because there was a need. There was a dire need for making sure that people can save money, can find ways for making payments, which they couldn't traditionally do. And it worked really well because, when COVID happened, cashless transactions, really took off. And I don't even use my credit card anymore. I'm using mobile payments to make a lot of payments for almost everything I do every day, even at the supermarket, when I buy, a small packet or something. So the same way, I think, because of this requirement and this need in our continent for having this right energy solutions in place, I have a strong feeling that we're going to come up with some real innovative solutions that are specific for Africa to support with those energy requirements. So I'd just say there's an opportunity that lies there in terms of how can we use that connectivity in reducing carbon emissions, climate action, through this reduction in energy consumption, and at the same time ensuring that the quality of service, as you see my connection dropped, that quality service is not impacted. So that's just my parting words. And finally, I just put this slide up. It was a slide that I was trying to get out, which is the breaking the energy curve concept that I was talking about. And this just talks about, the different things that we are doing to bend that curve, as I mentioned, as we move towards 5G in Africa. So those are my parting words, and thank you very much, Donald, for giving us the opportunity to have this fireside chat.
Thank you. Thank you, Ayub. Thank you, Rose. I'll now move on fairly quickly to the second pillar, which is digital inclusion. All right. And Zakia, I'll let you have the floor now.
Donald, thank you for this opportunity. I'm very glad to hear our alignment with the UN, as Rose has also pointed out, about how critical it is to close the digital divide, especially in our markets in Africa, and to close this through affordability and technological innovation. And I think, as my good colleague Jean-Francois will also affirm, within the context of an enabling regulatory environment with the UN, with member states, with the ITU, I think Ayub has very well set the stage by showing the link between connectivity and the environment and business and the interrelated nature of what we're all trying to achieve. So I think a good stage has been set. And if you would allow me, I'd like to talk a little bit more about digital inclusion and why that is important and why Ericsson specifically has chosen to focus on this element as well. I think some of you or everyone may know of findings by GSMA in about 2020 that shows that mobile technologies and services add about 8% to sub-Saharan Africa's GDP. But while digital inclusion is a pathway for economic growth, the World Economic Forum also recently found that Africa remains the world's least connected continent. Around only 39% of people use the internet. This is why it is so important for Ericsson to focus our efforts here. Through research and on-the-ground work, we understand the power of digitalization to address societal needs and to create positive impact at scale. And now it's more important than ever to bridge that digital divide so that everyone can enjoy the benefits of being part of the digital economy and truly that no one is left behind. There are several ways in which Ericsson does this. Firstly, we enable financial inclusion. Again, statistics like from the World Bank show that in sub-Saharan Africa, for instance, we have the largest unbanked population in the world in terms of the formal banking sector. However, as Ayub explained, in terms of the use of mobile money and cashless transactions, Africa also now has more mobile money users than anywhere else in the world. And that is the power and testimony to innovation, to real pressing socio-economic solutions that people are facing on our continent. And this greater financial inclusion offers the possibility to bring millions more people into the formal economy, boost individual livelihoods, and transform economies, hence our focus on financial inclusion on the continent. And then, of course, the big one, connecting the unconnected. And we do this by deploying networks that support universal connectivity. We use cost-efficient upgrade paths all the way from 2G to 5G, and we find viable ways to provide internet for all because we know that in ICT we have a powerful tool to help deliver and support the UN SDGs. We're also motivated to make an impactful and immediate contribution during emergencies, especially in humanitarian crises. In about 2,000, employees in Ericsson put their voices forward to support a global volunteering initiative to respond to suffering caused by disasters. So through ongoing, over 20 years later, through ongoing efforts by our volunteers, we use our core competencies to provide connectivity and communication support to humanitarian workers. These are the people who save lives and in turn support communities most affected by natural disasters or prolonged crises. What Ericsson does is to install and maintain internet connectivity until local services have sufficiently recovered or the increased capacity is no longer required. We've undertaken these missions worldwide and in Africa in 11 countries that have been affected by a number of events such as cyclones, Ebola, COVID-19, and other crises, including in Uganda, for instance. This is again one of the areas sometimes overlooked or not spoken about enough, but a critical way to bridge the digital divide, making an immediate impact in situations where it's most urgently required. And lastly, one of the areas which I'll elaborate on a little bit more is closing that divide by changing the lives of some of our youngest people. To make a positive impact, we need to focus on making education more accessible, affordable, and relevant for the 21st century citizen. And these are some of our efforts to ensure that people can access the world of information and the opportunities that come from being available online. Gloria, if we can go down to the next slide. Thank you. What I'd like to talk a little bit about is what we're focusing on. So Ericsson aims to be the preferred partner to bridge the digital divide using mobile broadband, specifically 3GPP technology, which is considered one of the most cost-efficient options to empower people through digital infrastructure. And why do we do this? If we weren't aware about it before, I think 2.5 years into the global COVID-19 pandemic, the criticality of connectivity has never been highlighted more clearly. From children that need to learn remotely and online when schools suddenly close, to health messaging, to information about resources and support, from keeping connected with loved ones who were physically distant and were not allowed to travel to each other, and as importantly, to ensuring financial remittances, which became even more critical as incomes and economies were negatively affected. Digitalization proved how important it was to at least keep society going under extraordinary and very, very challenging circumstances. This is the importance of ICT, the connections that it creates. However, still worldwide to this day, around 2.9 billion people remain offline. And there are multiple reasons for this. It could be due to high costs, perhaps in some ways, even the regulatory environment. But even when there's an enabling regulatory environment, there could be a lack of digital literacy or a basic lack of access to connectivity. So by deploying cost-effective mobile broadband solutions, Ericsson has helped increase the number of people connected to the internet last year. I'm sure the graph is a little bit small. The numbers that we show are not as important as the trend you can see. Year on year, Ericsson continues to increase connections, making sure that people can access the internet. And what we have set is a new target of increasing connectivity to 500 million people worldwide by 2025, compared to the about 79 million people that we had connected by 2018. As you can see, this is a huge leap, but we hope that the benefits for everyone will flow from that. Last year, we achieved our goals and we continue to work towards expanding connectivity and upgrading networks, while we advocate for future-proof, secure, and cost-efficient networks. This has the potential really to contribute to all 17 UN SDGs. And there are many ways in which we achieve that. One of the ways I'd like to focus on briefly is providing accessible, affordable, 21st century relevant education. Okay, so what I'd like to tell you more about, as I said, is using education as a means of closing the digital divide. Now, as Ayub and Jean-Francois and my team know, I can talk about this forever. It's an area, like the environment as well, that I'm absolutely passionate about. So I'm going to try and rein myself in and talk a little bit around what it means, who we work with, and why it's so important. Last year, through the World Economic Forum's Edison Alliance, Ericsson committed to empowering 1 million children and young people through digital learning, through tools, content, and development programs by 2025, and this is a global target. We will achieve this by deploying our flagship education program called Connect to Learn. This is key in helping us enable a sustainable and connected Africa. As you can see from the map, although it's probably a little bit tiny on screen, if you just looked at Africa and the dots, you'll see that we have heavily invested in Connect to Learn and education most across Africa compared to our operations worldwide, because we believe in the importance of education in terms of driving that inclusivity we've spoken about in Africa. So for over 10 years, Connect to Learn's purpose has been to empower teachers, students, and schools through connectivity and through digital learning solutions to deliver that quality 21st century education we all need in this fourth industrial revolution age that we're all living through. We also provide young people with digital skills that are essential for their socio-economic development. Now, as Rose said earlier, information is power. And to be able to access that slew of information online is access to another source of power. In addition to our Edison Alliance commitment in 2020, Ericsson also joined the UNICEF and ITU-led GIGA initiative. This is aimed at achieving global school connectivity mapping by 2030. I'll talk a little bit about connectivity shortly. Through our work, which is both financial and in-kind support, data analysis, etc., we've contributed towards GIGA's achievement in connecting initially over 3,200 schools across 4 continents, including in Africa. Now, Connect to Learn is a program exactly as the name suggests, connecting and supporting learning. The reason we place such a strong emphasis on inclusion through connectivity is that the lack of connectivity for schools and learners means exclusion. This is marked by a lack of access to the wealth of information online, fewer resources to learn and grow, and limited opportunities for the most vulnerable of our citizens to fulfill their potential. Quality and reliable broadband connectivity is what's important. And what this means is teachers can engage better with their students in the classroom. The teachers would have far greater flexibility, access to more resources and information, deliver real-time feedback to students, and my personal view is probably make lessons a lot more fun as well, just by being able to play a YouTube video or to show examples of what other students are doing online, to connect up with other schools. Again, opening up this world of possibilities in the classroom for lesson planning, etc., merely by having access to a broadband connection. However, once schools, teachers, students are connected, what do? How do we enable learning? Ericsson does this by providing online content, which actually complements the formal curriculum. So we don't look at replacing the curriculum in any way. What we do is we provide ICT education, tools, programs that focus on digital literacy and skills development for both different age groups and competence levels. And here we support the learning of both students and their teachers. I think what's important and something we're all aware of probably when we talk about how quickly time goes or how fast things develop is ICT technologies evolve in the blink of an eye. So it is also important to support the ongoing development of teachers and provide them with the relevant tools to manage their lessons and teaching activities better. And this is something we also support. So our objective with Connect to Learn is really summarized in 2 ways. How can we use technology to learn? and how can people learn about technology. This is Ericsson's two-pronged approach to really ensuring digital inclusion through education. And again, as Ayub has spoken about, Rose has spoken about, and I'm sure our colleague Chris and Jean-Francois will also highlight, it is only by working in partnerships that we can make an impact. Now, education is not about just UN SDG 4. There are a number of other developmental goals that it can enable, which includes gender equality and peace and justice through ICT-enabled education. I think, as I said, there's a lot I can speak about. This is a critical and important topic to us, and glad to see earlier UN convened forums this year as well that spoke about the importance of education in the digital age and what that means. And I thank you, Donald, for allowing me the opportunity to highlight what Ericsson is doing to ensure that we close the digital divide.
Thank you, Zakia. Thank you very much. I think when we have spoken in different fora, actually, when we have spoken about sustainability, maybe environmental sustainability seems to get the lion's share of the attention, and the other topics maybe not so much, but you have very elaborately indicated exactly what the thought process is when it comes to digital inclusion as a pillar of Ericsson Sustainability. So now I want to bring in Chris as well, who works with this, I think, every day. Ayub did allude to the research that Ericsson carried out with Imperial College of London on 10% increase in broadband and a corresponding 0.8% increase in GDP. And Chris, I think there's been, in many countries, a specific realization of the importance of digital solutions or going digital. In fact, there have also been market-driven or market-induced digital innovations. But from where you are sitting, what do you see as the areas where digital inclusion could most critically be implemented to have the greatest impact? And your general thoughts about digital inclusion as a component of sustainability.
Sure. Thank you so much, Donald. And many thanks to the Ericsson team for this invitation to discuss digital inclusion. You're absolutely right that we see opportunities for greater impact in development by promoting digitalization. And really the areas that, so UNCDF on its own is involved in the implementation of programs in various countries, in low to middle income countries, that's focused on leaving no one behind in the digital era. We are striving to build inclusive digital economies. And the areas that we think are most critical, I mean, if you look at Uganda and other African economies, the largest number of individuals are involved in agriculture for economic gain. And so this touches over 70%, at least in Uganda, but actually that statistic is quite uniform across the continent. And so as we talk about digital inclusion, can we leverage digital platforms, digital service offerings to improve access to agricultural inputs, access to market information? Because again, when you look at the largest number of individuals, this is where they are getting their income. And so when we think of inclusion, let's think about those sectors. I'd also like to call to attention, the education sector. Of course, Zakia and others have talked about education being a major area of inclusion. And this, of course, came to the fore as we've all faced the pandemic. But can we, regardless of socioeconomic status, all of us are involved in the education sector. We send our children to school, but can we leverage digital platforms to improve access to educational materials? And not just for the end beneficiary, not just for the students, but also for the teachers. And so education is another sector where we believe that a focus for digital inclusion will be key. But I think, and of course Ericsson is involved in this, is that not just access to education or access to agricultural inputs, but think about the payments for these services, that enabling rural communities, those in danger of being left behind, enabling them to be able to pay for these services. So payments, infrastructure, and capability is key in order to ensure that indeed we are achieving digital inclusion. Healthcare is another one that I think should not be overlooked at all. Obviously, many times when we face, I think, again, all sections of society, when there's an emergency, the biggest one usually faced is health related. And so beyond the day-to-day and beyond the investment in education, when people face major impact, it's usually health related. And so being able to access healthcare or health-related information, leveraging digital platforms in order to do that is quite important. We've been facing, as we've gone through this pandemic, we've seen how important it is to access quality information and to be able to access that efficiently and in a timely manner. And so healthcare is yet another area of focus as we think about digital inclusion that I think is a major focus for these efforts today. I liked, again, the previous discussion also touched on climate change, and I want to just highlight that briefly, that climate change affects us all. Unfortunately, it affects underserved communities much more greatly. And so if you think about agriculture, for example, climate change will impact productivity, will impact just efficiency in delivery of even goods to market. And so digitalization reduces cost of really cost of access to markets, but also the carbon footprint in terms of how far people have to travel in order to access information, access different networks. And so it is important that we leverage digitalization to address that in order to limit the impact of climate change, especially on underserved communities. Okay. So Donald, these are some areas that I think, as we talk about digital inclusion, these are some areas of focus. And of course, at UNCDF, overall, we work to unlock public and private financing for underserved communities. But more and more digitalization is key in unlocking that financing because, as you mentioned, if you look at the uptake of mobile money, agency banking, these are very, very reliant on digital platforms and digital service offerings. And we've taken a leadership role in that because of that increasing connection and the efficiencies that it delivers. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chris. And Zakia, maybe to have the Ericsson component, the Ericsson flavor of this. I mean, connectivity and mobility is a significant value creator, but there's also other players and partners on this call. In your opinion, how can everyone contribute to a digitally inclusive society?
Thank you, Donald. Yes, I think one of the underlying themes which we speak about all the time through this presentation, but something again to be highlighted is just how critical partnerships are. So we know that the scale, the scope, sorry, I use my hands and talk a lot. The scale, the scope, the complexity, the interrelated nature of the challenges that we as a society face worldwide, and that is underscored by the great aims of the UN SDGs means no single party can achieve impact alone. It's just not possible. It doesn't matter how big, how small any organization is. It doesn't matter if it's from the public sector, from authorities in government, organizations such as the UN, private sector players like Ericsson, our customers. It doesn't matter whether it's an NGO. Every party has a set of skills, has a set of resources, knowledge, financial, human, and other, in order to contribute to solutions. And I think that's what's important to underline here. I think, there is the saying, and I don't recall if it's an African proverb or not, but certainly something that I found to be true in my work, which is if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I think this is what sustainability is really about. If we want to make that difference, we need to hold hands, find our common interests, and we will face challenges and difficulties. Many of the problems are good problems we face. You know, the opportunity to educate children into and induct them into the world of ICT. I've seen, for instance, really how children's eyes light up when they have their first experience with programming for the first time, when they use Lego mindset tools to build a robot, for instance. So these are good problems to have where we bring these opportunities, but many of the problems are complicated and challenging. And I think the only way we can move forward is by jointly leveraging the knowledge, the skills, the resources of partners to tackle solutions.
Thank you. I mean, you can't overemphasize the idea of partnerships when it comes to sustainability. And the three attributes you provided, the scope, the complexity, and the scale. If you want to achieve those in any meaningful, to any meaningful degree or extent, then it falls on the quality of the partnerships that you build. So thank you for clarifying that. And then Chris, parting short on a digital inclusion, because a lot of times we are driving the business and we're driving the possibilities, and maybe we don't talk too much about the fact that digital inequalities could be a real problem for us to deal with, and I think you face this every day. So parting shots on the whole concept of digital inclusion within sustainability from you, please.
Thank you so much, Donald. And indeed, very important points are raised by our colleagues here. I think we all have a role to play, and several stakeholders, you know, some on this call, but also others who will be reading your report and engaging with you. You know, many of us are policymakers, and I think that indeed, as was mentioned earlier, that what role do we have to play if we are formulating policy? How are we formulating that policy in order to ensure that underserved communities, you know, whether it be rural farmers, women, refugees, that they're able to access and use these platforms, these services to improve their well-being? Innovators, people, we talk about mobile money all the time, but beyond just withdrawal or sending and receiving, what are some use cases that would benefit various communities, and can we innovate and come up with those in order to add value to those communities that otherwise are being left to struggle as we try to achieve, you know, sustainable development? If we look at infrastructure providers, obviously Ericsson being a big player in this space, and I like, Donald, what you said, that, you know, you ensure that the networks that you are supporting are able to enable universal connectivity. That's very important, because otherwise infrastructure is a major limitation. And I think that, you know, as an infrastructure provider, and you are setting a great example for others to follow. And of course, educators. Obviously, the, you know, skills are a major gap when we talk about digital inclusion. So the knowledge and skills of various community segments, we need to work to improve those to ensure that indeed people have the right capabilities to access and use these different services. Now, we are, you know, and I'm going to use your forum to sort of have a call to action, that beyond Ericsson, we are really calling upon others to join us. UNCDF tries to play a catalytic role in the sense that we identify the constraints. You know, if technology is so great for education, why are we in danger of being of having several community members left behind? And so we try to identify those constraints and address those constraints, whether it be through technical assistance, through various de-risking financial instruments, and then have other stakeholders come in. And I think we've all talked about sustainability. If there's a viable business model, let somebody else is out there will be out there to make money and deliver that service. So we try to identify the constraints and then have others join in order to have, like Zakia said, the opportunity for us all to go together. And so, you know, as I leave this forum, I think those are my final thoughts, and we really appreciate the opportunity to be involved in this discussion and invite colleagues from private sector, public sector, to join us in this fight to achieve digital inclusion. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Chris. Okay, that's pillar number 2, and now the final pillar, which is responsible business. Gloria, if we could move to the next slide. The final pillar, which is responsible business, and here I will invite Jean-Francois. Next slide, please, Gloria.
Thank you very much, Donald. And in that third and last section of our event today, I try to give a bit of a roundup and to a certain extent show how the different pillars of our sustainability work at Ericsson fits into the bigger picture of corporate responsibility. And I'd like to start with that overall view, how Ericsson has endeavored itself to continuously improve and strengthen its responsible business practices, with probably 3 main objectives: trust, transparency, and integrity. I would also start from really the fundamentals of human rights, and from there, ethically and environmental sound business practices are the one expected from a good corporate citizen. And I'll come back to corporate citizenship. But also looking inwards, the fair and safe working conditions and the employee well-being are fundamental to Ericsson culture and identity. And as a recent joiner of Ericsson, I can probably share my personal experience of finding a very benevolent corporate culture in this large organization. And in order to achieve this, this is coming from the top. So there are tools and policies at board of directors level that come down with ongoing due diligences to make sure that on those 4 pillars, that is ethics and compliance, sensitive business, responsible sourcing, and health and safety and well-being, we have the tools and the processes that enable to achieve our objective in those four areas. So talking of tools, I'll probably say about a few words about Ericsson Code of Business Ethics. That is also something that we use with our partners. As shown in the slide here, we have those 3 big pillars. So that responsible business, we have the corporate citizenship. So the first one is more inward. The second one is also going outwards, and how volunteering, sponsorship, and donation can drive that impact. And the ESG reporting, and Ayub mentioned the reporting that is done. I will move to the next slide to highlight another dimension, which is how the workforce is engaged, and diversity and inclusiveness are 2 key dimensions of talent and HR policies at Ericsson. I think we're not the only organization recognizing that one of the most important assets of the company are people, not only technologies, which are the cornerstone of innovation. The talent, the efforts to develop and retain talent are, of course, the usual tools of a HR policy. But I'd like to delve into the gender component of those policies. In 2021, Ericsson has restated its commitment to achieve a 30% representation of women in its total workforce, but also among line managers and the executive population. And at the end of last year, the share of women in the total workforce was 25%. It was lower with line manager, 21%. However, at the executive level, we reached a 36%, which is above the target set for 2030. So there are different processes to reduce bias and barriers in the recruitment and in the performance management. and how female employee can develop their talent and experience and to reach and be appointed to higher position. And across the workforce, collaboration and advocacy for gender equality is encouraged. And I would probably take the example of the last International Women's Day, which was also about breaking biases and how different country teams have come together to achieve this. Now, in order to have this, you need to make sure that you have the skill pools to enable that ambitious policy and supporting STEMs. It's not only self-serving, but also there to create a stronger ecosystem with our partners and the industry and the African digital economy at large. So I think a good number is that approximately 50% of the young graduates that have been recruited in Africa were female. And as we progressing, we see that 45% approximately of the 600 interns in Africa and Middle East were also female. So I think you see a little bit those different steps between education, young professionals, and career development at Ericsson as that testimony to that strong commitment. I'm coming to an end of that last section, and that was aimed to give you the broader background of corporate policies at Ericsson and how sustainability and corporate responsibility can be seen from that overall perspective. We have now planned a Q&A session, and I will hand over to Donald as our master of ceremony to open up the floor. Thank you, Donald. You need to open your mic.
Yeah. Thank you very much to everyone who has stayed until this time. It's been a lot of hours of talking and listening. So now we'd like to open up the floor to those of you who are new to Ericsson, those who have worked with Ericsson, or those of you who are new to Ericsson Sustainability, because it's the first time we're taking this report out, especially in Uganda. We will be sharing the sustainability report, of course, so you can take a look at it after. And feel free, of course, we operate a branch office in this country. Feel free to reach out to us by any other means if you'd like to have a further discussion about Ericsson in the sustainability space. So if there are no other comments, Rose, I will turn to the panelists now and maybe just take some parting shots. Rose, it's been 2 hours of everything, digital inclusion, environmental or climate action, as well as responsible business. Anything you would like to shine the light on for our guests to take away today?
First, just to start by really thanking you as a team in Ericsson for this event, because I think increasingly it's very important for the general public really to know the role that that industry and private entities like yourselves are playing in contributing to sustainability. Within the UN, as I said, we've come to the realization for several years now that you are indeed going to be the key drivers for achieving sustainability across the board, but also for enabling us to achieve the 1.5-degree goal set in the Paris Agreement that will allow us to live within the planetary boundaries. Because I think someone already alluded to the IPCC report, that we have just about reached the tipping point, and that without the right partnerships and solutions coming from those partnerships such as yourselves, we are going to find ourselves in a really unlivable planet. We're already being told this year we are going to see the hottest and most extreme weather events we've seen, and it really doesn't matter anymore where you are in the world, whether it's a small developing country like Africa or a developed country like Germany, where I am now, or Denmark. Extreme weather events, including heat waves and everything, is something. So the issue of partnership, and therefore that we all must act collectively as solution providers, is really important. And I think that demonstration by Ericsson is absolutely key. And in closing, just to reiterate the invitation and the call that I made, I'm sure you're already part of so many solution teams, as we'd like to call them now globally. But for this particular team working in Africa, but also globally, because we too ourselves are a global entity, to join us strongly, really, for the digital divide and the solutions that we want to have in Africa. For COP27, for the Innovation and Solutions Day, we'll have 10 days of thematic discussions, but I think that's important. But also going forward, COP28 in Abu Dhabi, that we also think is going to be very important. I'm meeting the delegation for the UAE today to discuss those partnerships. So again, just to say thank you very much for the partnership, for the possibilities moving forward of how we can engage. So thank you very much, colleagues.
Thank you, Rose. Thank you very much for joining. Chris, takeaways.
Thank you so much, colleagues. As I mentioned earlier, just really wonderful opportunity to discuss these key issues with you. And I think, again, as we talked about that, when we talk about sustainability, agreed, we talk about partnerships. Indeed, how can different stakeholders continue to engage in digital inclusion, making sure that nobody's left behind, and how can that work continue even when UNCDF is no longer part of that equation? And for us, the key answer there is indeed partnerships, and key partnerships from the private sector. So we are glad to see Ericsson leading the way in this regard. Very much looking forward to delving into this report. And again, thank you, Donald, and your team for the invitation. Looking forward to doing more together and collaborating further. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chris. And then maybe finally, to wrap it up from the Ericsson side, Zakia.
Donald, what I was saying is, for me personally, I often honestly find it quite easy to feel overwhelmed by the challenges we face, especially the environmental challenges. It scares me, like I'm sure it scares most people, and it scares me beyond belief. My mind grapples at what we're experiencing. The effects are real, it's at home, and I worry about how much worse it could get. But through the work of Ericsson, through the incredible work of the UN, through the IPCC reports, through all the enabling mechanisms, through solutions Chris and his team offers in terms of finance and development, etc., I also try and remember that while we may not be able to mitigate the worst of effects, both environmental and social, what we have in Africa is a unique resource. We have the youngest continent globally, and really it is in the power of all of us as different stakeholders, as the adults, to help our young people, our future, as they will be the ones to help us overcome the difficulties that we face. That is how I would like to conclude.
Thank you very much, Zakia.
Thank you.
So we've come to the end of this presentation today. Great audience. Thank you very much to the panelists and the partners from the United Nations for joining and enriching this discussion.